Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Elizabeth Perez from All Chicago. Today we will be discussing the FY 2019 HUD COC competition for advanced users training. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have a lot of stuff to cover. So we'll go ahead and begin. We do anticipate that the training will take only an hour and a half. So we'll make sure that we honor and respect that time. So a few housekeeping rules. All the lines have been muted. If you have any questions, you can feel free to enter those in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. We will have, if time allows, for some Q&A, and we'll be able to open up the line. So if you could raise your hand and ask any questions, we'll unmute you and you can ask your questions. If not, as we're doing the presentation, feel free to submit any questions. We'll take pauses here and there for any questions that are submitted. We do have a couple of handouts. So this PowerPoint presentation is available and can be accessed through the handout section of GoToWebinar. So you can feel free to click on that link and download that. We also have created a resource link handout that's a lot of HUD resources. Hyperlinks are included in there, so that way you have the ability to just go and click on those and it'll be directing you to that resource that's available on HUD website instead of searching through it. In addition, this webinar is being recorded, so in the event that one of your colleagues was unable to join us today, they do have the ability to view it. So we'll be posting this recorded webinar later on today and posting it to the All Chicago website. All right, before we begin, just an opportunity to welcome you and to share our staff here at All Chicago. Our team continues to grow, so on your screen you'll see the variety of team members here at All Chicago that helps support all of our service providers through the NOFA process. So we have Dave, Karen, myself, Elizabeth, Renee, Doug, Jennifer, Bridget, Max, and Torlin. So in the room with me, I do have Max Burns, which is our program coordinator. So you can always feel free to reach out to myself or Max if you have any questions. We'll be the main ones working with the renewal project applications. So you can always feel free to reach out to us. But we also want to take an opportunity to hear from you. So in the chat box, if you can enter your name, where you're from, and your title, and how many HUD COC funded programs you have at your agency. As you can see on your screen right below, there is a sample of kind of how I have it set up. So my name is Elizabeth Perez from All Chicago. I'm a senior program manager, and we have 2 HUD COC funded programs. All right, so I see Matthew, Debbie, Jennifer, Kathy, David, Ann, Liz, Kevin, Joe, Luciana, Randall, Sandra, Ona, Dave, Jim, Yuki, Monique, Alvina, Carolyn, Michael. So welcome everyone, and Erica, Lorzell, James, Andrea, Mandy, Levon. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining. I believe I know a large number of you, but there are some new folks. Steven's not new, but there are some new names that I haven't had the chance to meet. So welcome. Perhaps you're new to your agency or just to this kind of work. So thank you for joining us today. And I have Jackie and Terry. Welcome, everyone. So it's wonderful to see everyone joining us. So I'm happy that you can make it. So in addition, I do have a poll for everyone. So let me launch that one. All right. So our current poll is I want to get an idea from everyone as to what your familiarity is with the COC NOFA competition. So because based off the names, I don't recognize everyone, just kind of want to have an idea where you land. If maybe this is your first time, you have no idea what the NOFA is, but maybe a colleague of yours shared that you must attend this. Let us know if you're out there. If you know what the NOFA is, and you're just kind of here to know what your next steps are. You've dabbled in it previously, or maybe you've done this numerous times in previous competitions, or you're a NOFA geek like Max and I and have read the 80-page document and have read all of HUD guidance and have had in-depth conversations about what HUD is putting out there. So we just kind of want to take a quick glance at where everyone lands. So we'll just give it one more minute for people to complete that poll. And I see Vivian joined. Hey, Vivian. And David. Great. All right. So I am going to close. Seems like the majority of people on the line have participated in previous competitions. So we're like at 55% that have done this. The next leading one is that I have some fellow NOFA geeks who just need a quick refresher and have read everything, but just want to make sure that you're doing everything right. And then some that have, you know what it is. So thanks all for completing that, and it's helpful to know kind of where everyone lands. All right, so a few objectives for today's webinar. We want to make sure after hearing this webinar that you have, we're able to share some highlights of the competition and what this NOFA entails, understanding what our local process is here in Chicago, because we know that a couple of our agencies do have HUD CSC funded programs in the suburban Cook County. So we want to make sure that you understand what Chicago's local process is. And the big one, understanding how to complete the renewal project application. We know this happens one time a year, so we want to make sure that this is a quick refresher. It doesn't go into very much details and screenshots as to step by step. We did have the beginners training yesterday in person. So hopefully those very newbies were able to come in and kind of get just that step by step. And then finally, we'll do a quick overview about some of the HUD resources and how All Chicago can support you as well. All right. So on our agenda, we're going to do a quick overview of what today's funding environment is, discuss the process and deadlines, and then give that quick eSNAPS overview and followed up by submission, process, and resources. So because we have a pretty good mix of people who maybe have read the NOFA and some that have not, we wanted to just dab a little bit on the NOFA highlights and what we saw. For the most part, we did see some general, same things that we saw in previous competitions. So we did see that HUD will continue to rank all the projects into Tier 1 and Tier 2. So in the event that HUD is unable to provide funding for all the communities, they have requested that communities nationwide do rank their projects, and 94% of our annual renewal amount is composed of Tier 1, and the remaining is Tier 2. At this moment, right now, we have not finalized the ranking policies, so they will be going forward to the COC board in August. So as soon as the COC board has approved our local ranking policies, we will be sharing a communication so you are aware of what those are, and we will impose those policies, and you'll be able to see your project and how it will be ranked for this competition. The second time for the NOFA is that HUD included the domestic violence bonus. So there is an opportunity for new money, anywhere from $50,000 to $5 million for communities to start new DV programs, and also SSO coordinated entry project. Those did go through the local new project process. So we did see a few that had expressed some interest. And
DV is still underway.
And DV is currently underway. So if you haven't seen that communication, feel free to reach out to us and we can send you kind of details about that. We did see that there's an emphasis on employment and income. So HUD did increase the points or include new questions regarding employment and income in the COC application. We also saw that HUD moved away from the language that they had regarding housing first, and it had a lot of new language regarding low barriers. However, we still know that housing first is an evidence-based approach, and it is still an approach that we believe is a primary approach that we've been using here in Chicago and that works for individuals experiencing homelessness because we meet them where they're at. And we have seen studies that show where individuals who, are forced to do some participation, exit out quickly. For the first time, we have seen some service participation flexibility. We did notice that the NOFA did not indicate any additional points for anyone that wants to follow this flexibility. We did notice that in the renewal project application, HUD does want to see what those service participation requirements may look like and how you plan on imposing them and your rationale for including those. So we do want to share that although HUD does offer that flexibility, we have not seen any, any language suggesting that for some reason we'll get more additional points. And, kind of tying it back to Housing First, we have seen that individuals that are imposed some service participation requirements tend to exit out at a higher rate, and that tends to hurt our system performance. So, those are some things to consider, and we're more than happy to discuss further if you are thinking about pursuing something else. The NOFA also addresses some racial disparities, so we were happy to see that the NOFA did include language regarding how are we addressing as a community the racial disparities, which is wonderful given that HUD has issued out some tools regarding racial disparities. So it's a conversation that we will continue to pursue in the months to come. We continue to see the emphasis on system performance and ensuring that all the projects that are renewed follow the COC interim rule and the Hearth Act. So if you are not sure or never read the COC interim rule, we would highly encourage you to view those resources. The federal appropriations also focus on reallocation and encouraging the COC to competitively rank all our projects based on performance. So as we know here locally in Chicago, we do offer the voluntary reallocation process during our local evaluation process. And some of you may have pursued this opportunity. So we'll be talking a little bit more on how to complete your renewal project application, but we did see that the COC application focuses very heavily on the reallocation and how are we doing that locally. And finally, for the COC application portion, we did see a large emphasis on system performance. So how, as a community, are we hitting those federal benchmarks, and have we seen reductions and increases in the different benchmarks that they've issued? So looking at what our past performance has been for the last couple of months and reductions, and they've included a lot of 5% kind of benchmarks. So we'll be talking a little bit more about those in the next couple meetings that we have scheduled for the next few weeks. So just to give you an overview of what the process is, so at this point we're at the beginning, so we'll be looking for everyone, all agencies to complete their project application. So this would include all our all our HUD funded renewal projects and the new projects. So if you've been informed that your new project proposal was allowed to move forward in the NOFA competition, you are expected to complete a new project application in eSNAPs. So we'll be sending out additional information for those agencies that have been invited to submit an application. We have done this as a webinar, but we are also available for any Q&A just because that application looks very different than the renewal. Once everyone has completed their project applications, All Chicago, which is known as a collaborative applicant, will collect and review all the applications. And we, in turn, will also be working on the COC application. So we pull in a few of our stakeholders, such as DFSS and DCFS and other stakeholders to just help us complete the narrative portion of this. And then once we have those two pieces, we submit it as a consolidated application to HUD. For my NOFA geeks who have read the NOFA, or maybe if you did have the ability to see our highlights document that All Chicago issued, you are aware that the consolidated application is due to HUD by September 30th. However, within the NOFA, HUD did indicate that all project applications are due in eSNAPs 30 days before the deadline. So therefore, we had to institute an additional sub-deadline just to ensure that we meet the deadlines that HUD has issued in the NOFA. Similar to previous years, HUD may issue up to 2 conditional funding announcements. So we usually see that HUD will inform communities what tier ones, all of tier one, who they were and what they were funded for. And then in a few months afterwards, they'll let us know how many of our tier 2 were funded. Now, in the event that your program does start their operating within the first quarter, we do encourage you to start thinking and planning ahead for that. We have seen that a couple of our projects who have an earlier start in the year end up doing some drawdowns from their lending lines. So those are some things to take into account as we continue to move forward in this competition. So the NOFA did entail a lot of threshold pass or fail areas for our renewal project applications. And it included a lot of focus areas that HUD had indicated and that we have heard from NOFA debriefings as to areas that they will focus on when reviewing the renewal project applications. So they really want to ensure that for everyone that is submitting a renewal project application, that you're really focusing that the correct program component is selected. It's pretty crucial just because depending on what component type you select, different screens will show up. Yeah. You're also expected that any proposed activities are eligible cost under the program requirements. So if at any point you are unsure of what is an eligible cost, we do encourage you to review 24 CFR Part 578 to ensure that you are operating in alignment with that. You want to make sure that the narratives that you provide do respond to all the questions that they are asking and are meeting all that criteria. And finally, that all the data points are consistent across the board. So we have seen in previous competitions as well that there sometimes is some inconsistency between the different sections. So that's something that All Chicago here in their review process will provide some feedback in the event that we see any inconsistencies or anything that may just look a little bit weird. We'll make sure to flag that for you for your review. And finally, all required attachments must be dated between May 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2019. This is just to ensure that there are no delays in grants execution just because the attachment didn't have, an updated date. Because the renewal project applications do have the ability to import, we do see that a lot of those attachments may have a date that's older, so we just want to make sure that you're reviewing that, maybe opening it up and re-uploading if that's the case, or just checking it off and saving it so that an updated date appears. Additionally, there are a lot of threshold requirements for project applications, and HUD grades them in a pass or fail. So you want to make sure that you are abiding by all the statutory and regulatory requirements. An additional one is you want to make sure that you're an eligible applicant. So anyone that has not had a renewal application, in the past, you want to make sure that you are not applying. You want to also make sure that you are abiding by the project eligibility threshold. So that just means that you're meeting all the requirements from the previous grant application, that you're not providing any information that is contrary. You want to make sure that you're providing all the information regarding monitoring, findings, results from investigations, complying with the drawdown expectation that HUD has. We also want to make sure that all our renewal projects are abiding by and are consistent with the consolidated plan here in Chicago. We know that locally that plan was recently updated, so we will make sure that if we hear anything from the city, if any of our projects are not consistent, that we share that with you as soon as possible. All right, and I have a question. So when we're talking about consistent data, are we talking about consistency within eSNAPs or between eSNAPs and HMIS? So we're really focusing more on consistency within the project application. So we have seen sometimes some inconsistencies between what is stated in the narrative and also maybe in another section something inconsistent. So one great example is that maybe in the narrative someone will mention that they work only with young people, but when they get to the section regarding data and inputting like how many individuals they've served, it'll say that they're serving older adults. So those kind of inconsistencies we just want to watch out for and make sure that individuals are mindful and keeping a nice eye out for them. All right, so let's talk about deadlines. So because of the 30-day prior deadline that the NOFA has, we do have a quick turnaround time. So for now, our first deadline is August 5th. So by noon on August 5th, we are requesting that everyone submit a PDF copy of their project application from eSnaps for All Chicago to review. Once we have those, our team will begin to review all of the project applications and will provide you a feedback document by August 14th, where you'll have the ability to see any recommended changes or any suggested changes that we may have, just to ensure that we continue to remain competitive in this competition. Once that feedback is issued to you, you then have to submit all your project applications into eSnaps by August 19th. And the reason that we do first Survey Gizmo and then eSnaps is because once all the project applications have been submitted in eSnaps, you do not have the ability to change it until we release them. So this just allows for us and for you to make that quick, edits. It might be just a very simple thing that was accidentally overlooked that you have to change. So once you get that feedback survey, you're able to easily submit it into eSnaps. Once we have all those by August 19th, we will then issue out a second round of feedback. So just in case there's anything that maybe was accidentally overlooked or maybe still some outstanding items that we want you to continue to look at, you will receive an additional feedback document by August 23rd. More than likely, if everything, all the issues and all the comments were addressed in the first round, you will be getting that feedback comment just stating that you are okay and, we don't have any further comments for you. Finally, in the event that not all the edits were captured in the second round or we're having a little bit additional back and forth, we will be releasing those project applications. You'll get an email communication, probably followed up by a phone call, letting you know that we have released your application from eSnaps due to the following edits that are needed. Those projects will have the ability to make those necessary changes and resubmit by August 26th. So again, this timeline has been established by the HUD requirements, so we will not be granting any exceptions. But if you have some concerns or if there are some excruciating circumstances that is happening at your agency, please reach out to us so we can further discuss. All right. So we had a couple of questions. So Survey Gizmo link, how soon? So we will be posting the survey link by tomorrow, the latest. So you'll have the ability, if you've already been an eager beaver like me and have started your project application and are ready to submit, you can do so as of tomorrow. We also have another question. If the application is okay after the first round, do we need to resubmit in the second or third? So if everything is okay in the first round, you'll receive that feedback survey, and more than likely it will just say, yes, go ahead and submit into eSnaps. And if that is the case, you won't have to pursue the second or third, the third round. We just want to make sure that you ensure that you go from submitting a PDF in Survey Gizmo to actually submitting the application into eSnaps. We will be sending out an email communication to everyone on our listserv and also that has come to our in-person trainings and who have registered for this training to let you know that the link to Survey Gizmo is open. It is also included in this PowerPoint presentation, so in the event that you don't get it, you can easily view that as well. And are the new applications following this timeline? Yes, all applications are due into eSnaps by August 26th. There will be a special webinar in particular for the new projects. So just make sure that you are aware of that time so that you're able to do that. Attend that one. And all right, then we have, did we say we can't make changes from the GIW? So we haven't mentioned the GIW just yet, but that's a great question. So we'll be posting the updated GIW released by HUD. So as many may remember, we've gone through the GIW stage, submitted some edits that were not captured in the one issued by HUD and gave that to our local field office. So they have released a final GIW. So you cannot make any changes to the GIW. Now is not the time to make any amendments unless they have been approved by your local HUD rep. So in the event that you have had a grant execution between the GIW and now, or have had made a grant amendment that has been approved by HUD, you are able to make some changes, but other than that, we should not be seeing any changes between the budget line items. So you guys are getting ahead of me with the expansions projects. So submissions for expansions will look a little bit different from new projects, and we're going to touch upon this a little bit in this presentation. So we'll make sure that hopefully we're able to answer all of those. So, and then in eSnaps, does the project still have to update your agency forms? Yes, so please make sure as you're updating everything, the first step would be to complete your applicant profile, and that's where the majority of your agency projects are. All right, so I know we're getting into the meat of my presentation, so we're going to hold off a little bit just so that we dive into a couple of things that we're seeing and that are very specific to the project application. So a couple important changes that you're going to see. You know, the nice thing is the renewal project applications don't look that different from previous years. It's very great that we still have the ability to import data from FY 2018. Although if you do decide to pursue this, we highly encourage you to review and ensure that you are capturing what sections you are making a change on, because once you navigate to the submission changes page and indicate what section you want to make a change and select make a change on that page, you will no longer be able to change it back. So let's say if you go back into the application and you find that you selected you did not select a section that needs to be updated, you are not able to select that box from the submission changes page, and therefore will have to restart your application. So make sure that you are reviewing that and that you're selecting the appropriate boxes that have to make a change. You know, we know a lot of the information does not change from year to year. However, there are things that you wish to, you know, just review and update. So just make sure that you're conscious of that, because, you know, a lot of the information that you select, you don't want to make a change in, will just pre-populate and you will not be able to edit it. For those that have been approved for expansion, so this did go through our local process, you do have to submit 3 applications. So you have to submit one as a regular renewal project application, one as a new project that would just specify what are those expanding activities. And the third one would be an application that shows what the entire expanded project would be. So it's a little bit tricky. It's, you know, 3 times the work, but, you know, HUD does make that indication. The NOFA also indicates the opportunity for consolidation. So if you have a lot of projects and wish to pursue consolidation, you will have to submit an individual project for each renewal and then submit one consolidated application. HUD does allow that you can consolidate projects anywhere from 2 to up to 4 projects. So, you know, if that is something that you would wish to pursue, we also have a Q&A next week on Wednesday, where we'll be discussing a little bit about some potential changes regarding if you wish to pursue consolidation and what to look for. The NOFA also entails the opportunity to transition your grant. So in the event that you wish to transition a grant, so let's say you currently have a PSH project but wish to convert that maybe to a rapid rehousing, there is that opportunity. So it is a good option for some of those projects that may be underperforming based on the local evaluation tool. So we also have a Q&A on the 31st just to really think about what does this mean and whether this would be a good fit for your program. For those consolidating the grant, as we mentioned, you can do 2 up to 4 programs. They do have to be of the same recipient, so the same agency has to apply, and it has to be the same component. So we cannot see, maybe if you have a TH and a rapid rehousing, you cannot combine those 2 programs to make the joint TH and rapid rehousing. HUD did indicate some guidance as to which projects they will not allow to consolidate. So if you have any outstanding audits or monitoring finding, any obligations to HUD, any unresolved construction delays, or have some poor history of financial management and drawdown issues, or low levels of occupancy levels, and any other capacity issues, they would not allow for you and would actually not recommend that you consolidate. All right, so let's see if I've been able to answer. So if we plan to consolidate 2 grants, my understanding is that we need to submit 2 separate applications as well as a consolidated application. That is correct. If you plan to consolidate 2 of your existing grants, you would have to submit them as individuals, sort of as if they weren't pursuing that consolidation, and then 1 consolidated. And we do rank all 3 of those, and depending on whether HUD approves it, they would either approve the 2 renewals as solos or the consolidated one. So that's something to look out for once we get the funding announcement back. There's a question if there's going to be a checklist like we've seen in previous years. We haven't had a chance to update that, but we'll be focusing on which areas we have noticed are of the biggest impact that HUD has stated that they will be reviewing to kind of help us gear your attention on what focus areas to have on the application. And then the last one, so is this webinar will be recorded. It is being currently recorded and will be posted onto the All Chicago website later on today after this presentation. All right, so I love all these wonderful questions. Okay. So again, we know we have the HUD COC quarterly funded partners meeting next week on July 31st from 1 to 4. We have seen that many of you will be joining us, so we look forward to seeing you. In the event that you would like to learn more about consolidation and transitioning grants, we do have Q&As offered in the morning. So we do encourage you to come and chat, and it's very much geared to really listen from one another and to discuss what are some possible drawbacks or benefits to both of those options. So we hope that people will be able to join us. So we have a question that we consolidated 2 of our projects last year, one of which the end date is 1 month later than the current consolidated date, and the other one, so that they gave the 2 different. How do we reconcile in terms of funding and outcomes for that month? So I know HUD has issued out some guidance regarding the funding and outcomes, so we can definitely look forward. It sounds like you're more at the tail end, just because if you do decide to pursue consolidation, you do have to go with the project. HUD is going to honor the date of the first starting project. So if you have 2 grants that you're consolidating, one starts in January and one starts in April, they will issue out the consolidated grant for the one that started first in the year. So they have released some guidance as far as like the outcomes. They did, you are consolidating all of the entire funding from both of those projects. So, we can definitely pose a question to HUD because we're not sure. It sounds like you have a very specific question about the funding. So Patricia, let's just make sure to connect. I just want to make sure that I understand your question as far as the funding aspect, because the grant execution that you should have probably gone through with HUD would have indicated what your total amount is. And just because we know right now, if you're consolidating, you're just combining everything in budget line items. But HUD did indicate during this time last year that during the grant execution is the stage where they would be able to talk about maybe doing some shifting between budget line items. So great question, Patricia. All right, now we're going to dive into our eSnaps refresher. So again, just to start off with the project application, there are 4 main steps to access the actual project application. One, you want to make sure that you're reviewing your applicant profile. So this is really an agency level, about the DUNS number, who's your primary contact, who's your authorized rep, and so forth. The second step would be that you are indicating to HUD that you are interested in applying for funding in this NOFA cycle. So you want to register your agency expressing an interest in applying. 3, you'll then have to create a project application. This is where you'll have the ability to select if you wish to import data from the previous competition's project application. One thing to make sure that you do use the exact same name as it is stated in the GIW and your HUD contracts, just so there's no confusion as far as the naming conventions. And 4, it is through the submissions section of eSnaps that you're actually able to access the renewal project application. All right. So let's see, there's a question. No question, just saying thank you. You're welcome. So there are steps. There's a separate set of instructions as far as how to complete the applicant profile. New this year, we did see that HUD released a guidance on how to complete the form 2880. So I know in the past we've had a lot of questions as to what amounts and what should be indicated. So it was very nice of HUD to release some guidance as to what they are looking for. Because a lot of the information doesn't change from year to year, we just want to make sure that you do update that. It's sometimes not anything needs to be changed, but just make sure that you edit. You go to the end of the applicant profile, make it in an edit mode, and just kind of run through and check, make sure no numbers or emails have changed. And usually that refreshes and provides an updated date. All right, there's a question, if we want to change the name of a project, how can we do that? So I would reach out to your local HUD rep. I would not do that right now just because, these project applications are not reviewed by your local HUD rep. So in the event that you do decide to pursue and do a new naming convention, it just might throw them off at Washington and headquarters, who tends to read the applications, and we don't want, and then there's further implications because that naming of your project, a new name, would not be part of the consolidated plan. So there would be red flags that are raised stating that this project is not consistent with our consolidated plan of Chicago. So usually when we do see name changes, it is usually once the NOFA competition has ended. You can start talking to your local HUD rep as of now, but usually they do the naming convention change once you're in the grant execution stage. Right, I know this is always a hot topic, and I always have at least one person giving me a call, letting me know that they can't change anything in their applicant profile. So it is just a little bit tricky in this applicant profile because you have to go to the submission summary, which is the end of the applicant profile, and hit a button that says complete so that it makes it editable. And then you can go back into the previous screens, make some edits, and then go back to the submission summary and hit complete. It's important that you remember to go back to the submission summary and close it, just because once you do your renewal project application and you're getting ready to submit an eSNAPS, if you left it open, it will not let you submit your renewal project application in eSNAPS. So just make sure it's pretty easy, but sometimes if we're kind of rushing through things and forget that, it's going to hurt us at the end, and then we're worried that we did something else wrong. It's in the applicant profile that you're updating your 2880 form. We know that in the past, depending on the number of projects that you have, the amount of HUD assistance pre-populates based on the budgets of each individual renewal project application. So sometimes we see that individuals, maybe if you have 5 different projects, you start off with 1, and you see that HUD assistance is just based on that 1 project when it should be displaying like the total sum of those 5. So I wouldn't worry about that. It is just a feature that we do not have control over. Once you get through all 5 project application, that automatically updates. And once you're in eSNAPS, you'll be able to see it. They are asking for the code of conduct, so please make sure that you do review the link. HUD issues out a listing of who they have approved, which agencies for their code of conduct. I encourage you to view it. If your agency is listed on there, you do not have to upload it. If your agency is not listed on there, we would encourage you to submit it. I know here at All Chicago, we have submitted ours every year, but on their listing, we're listed as the emergency fund. So we just will continue to upload ours just because we don't want to face any delays in our grant executions because of something as minimal as that. All right, there's a question about where can you check for the code of conduct. So in our handouts, there is a link as to what that website looks like. So you can click on that link. It'll download a Word document for you, and it'll show you which agencies. You'll have to select which state, so you'll be able to see if your agency is listed on there. All right, the next step is you want to make sure that you are requesting that you are submitting an application for this funding opportunity. So you're going to click on the left-hand side of eSNAPS funding opportunity registrations. Obviously, you're going to make sure that your applicant name is listed correctly. And then you're going to click on what looks like a sheet of paper with a check mark that says Renewal Project Application FY 2019. Once you get to that screen, it'll just ask you a question whether you wish to register for this funding opportunity, and you select yes. The screen will then refresh, and then it'll take you, offer you the option to go back to the previous screen, and that just indicates that yes, you're going to be applying in this funding cycle. The third step is to create the project. So you're going to select the projects from the left-hand menu. You're going to select the renewal project application from the drop-down menu. And once your screen refreshes, it's going to appear as empty. So you're going to click on that icon that looks like a paper with a plus sign, and you're going to add your project. You're going to enter the name exactly as it appears on the GIW or your HUD contracts. And then there'll be a drop-down menu that asks if you wish to import information from the previous competition. So you can select that, or you can create it as new. A few things to think about when importing. Make sure that you are reviewing the information that is pre-populating. HUD did indicate that there were issues, and they actually did issue out conditional awards until those issues were resolved. So again, we don't want to make sure that you do receive your grants funds in an appropriate timeline, and we don't want to have any hiccups along the way. You want to make sure that all your responses are compliant with the competition, and different screens are going to show depending on what you select. So don't be alarmed. You know, we'll share a screenshot in a little bit about kind of how the different screen paths look like. Just that way you have the ability to see that. All right. So as you can see here, there's two paths on the left-hand side that'll show whether you pursued data from the previous year, what sections are a read-only, and then navigating to Part A, the submission without changes screen, to select which ones that you wanted to make changes. You know, there is a submit without changes, so that just means that you're not going to be able to edit anything in your project application, because we do know this is a new competition. There are going to be some changes, even if it is just one, regarding the number of clients you've served and the different characteristics. You just want to make sure that you're double checking and ensuring that you are going to make those changes. Once you select make a change and select the check boxes, you will not be able to edit that section anymore. So you want to make sure that whatever checkbox you are selecting is the appropriate box that you'll be making some changes. If you do not select that box, you will not be able to edit that screen. The other option is you can choose not to import the data and just complete the entire application as a blank screen. All right, let's see if we have. Just take a moment. All right, we don't have any additional questions. All right, step 4 is the submission. So you'll be navigating to the submission section of eSnaps. You can use the filtering functions to find the correct submission, and you want to select renewal project application. So you want to find any renewal project application for this competition, and you'll actually access the project application by clicking on that orange folder. It is one application per project, so just make sure that if you have 10 different projects that you have 10 different renewal applications in this section. All right, there's a question if there's going to be guidance on submitting an expansion request to a current project. So if you have been approved to expand your current project, which would have happened during the local new project process, there will be additional guidance on that. So we'll be tackling that in with a new project webinar, just to make sure that you are submitting all the appropriate documentations. If you have not been approved for expansion through our local new project process, unfortunately, we are not able to allow for any additional expansions. So in the project application, there are 8 sections. They're seen on your screen. You'll be able to see all these different sections in the left-hand side of eSnaps, and you can easily click on them to navigate to that section versus just clicking next and next and next. When you first open up the application, you will have to complete part 1 of the application before the rest appears. So you'll only be able to see what you're currently seeing on the left-hand side. And that's because there's a lot of I certify statements in these sections. So until you certify all of these, you will not be able to view sections 2 through 8. So just make sure that you do check off those boxes. We know that sometimes people want to verify everything else, but unfortunately the way eSnaps is set up, you won't be able to continue with the application until you check off those boxes. Right. In part 1 of the application, you just want to make sure that you're checking off confirming the federal award identifier, and that's just the first 6 digits of your expiring grant number, and they're located on the GIW. In case you don't have that information readily on hand, we will be posting the final GIW from HUD onto our website, so that way you can just review it and include those first 6 digits. You want to make sure that your proposed dates start in the calendar year 2020 and that the last day ends in calendar year 2021. And the month and the day matches your GIW. So you want to make sure that your start date, at least the day, is always on the first day of the month, and that the end date of your proposed is always on the last day of that month. For section 1E in compliance, you're always going to select B. Our program is subject to an Executive Order 12372, but has not been selected by the state for review. And finally, this is the section that you'll see all your information regarding your HUD 2880 form. Again, all this information is going to pre-populate. So if for any instance you do see any changes that you need to make to your form, you have to navigate back into the applicant profile to make those changes. For any project that has been approved for expansion, you will have to submit a new project application indicating what that is, and also an expanded one, and then a standalone, which would be just your usual if you were not renewing. There is a section for all the renewal projects that if you wish to expand this renewal program, so you will only be indicating yes for those that have been approved. Anyone else that has not been approved, you will be selecting no in this section. If you have been approved and are selecting yes, you'll be asked whether this application is a standalone. So that means that the renewal application that is currently being worked on is the original renewal project application. And you will be asked to submit another one that has the combined renewal expansion, which means, what does it encompass, the expansion and the original? So giving an entire scope of what an entire expanded project would look like. So the next screen, you'll be asked whether this project would like to be consolidated. So if your project is considering consolidations, you will be indicating on the screen that yes, it is. And then you'll get additional pop-up questions asking for more information. Again, if you are pursuing grant consolidation, you will have to submit individuals, sort of if it was just the same project application as in previous competitions, and then one for the grant consolidation. So, which is the surviving PIN number, which is just the surviving grant number, which is the first one that will start in a calendar year, and then which other grants are you combining it with. So you're going to indicate what those grant numbers are, the total funding amounts, and so forth. All right, there's a question as to when we will be updating the GIW to our website. So we'll be posting that after this webinar. So we will be sending out a communication so everyone has those links available. All right, section 2A is only for projects that have subrecipients. So we know a few of our agencies subcontract with other agencies that receive funding. So it's kind of like they're regranting some of their funds. In the event that this applies to you, you will be asked to add what that subgrantee, who that is, and also upload their non-for-profit documentation under the attachment section. All right, part 3A is the project details. So we want to make sure that you are selecting that the COC name and number is the Illinois 510 in Chicago. This is especially important because if you select another continuum of care, your eSNAPS project application will go to them and not us. So I will give you a call and let you know where is it. You'll tell me you submitted. Again, once you submit an eSNAPS, you cannot make any changes. So we will have to figure out who you sent your application to and then give that collaborative applicant a call to release your application. The CSE applicant name for All Chicago. Officially, we're known as All Chicago Making Homelessness History, so make sure that you do complete the full name for us. And then just, make sure that you are selecting the correct component type. It is especially important that you select this because if you select a different component type that is not what you have been funded to operate, you will be shown different screenshots. So if you do not have a safe haven but have a PSH, you'll get questions that only appear to safe havens. So you may be wondering why this looks different and so forth. All right, for your project description, so this is the narrative portion of the project application. You'll be providing a response to all the points seen on your screen. So you'll be asked, what is the target population? So who are you serving? What's your project plan for the identified housing and supportive needs? What are your anticipated outcomes? Who are you coordinating with? Who do you have linkages and services, whether they're federal or non-for-profit? Why should HUD continue to fund this program? And also, if you plan on implementing service participation requirements, you have to state what they are and how you plan to implement them and the rationale for that implementation. If you are operating a joint project, if the funds that are received through the HUD COC funding does not provide and cover both the TH and rapid rehousing, you do have to indicate what other funding sources you use in order to support those units. Because there is a character limit in the project description page, I recommend that you use Word and just know what that character limit is, and then paste that into eSNAPS. We do know that eSNAPS sometimes tends to run slowly or sometimes times you out at very odd numbers. So in the event that you're working on a narrative and you just lose track of time and don't hit save, you could potentially lose everything that you just written. So those are just some things to keep in the back of your mind. Also remember, eSNAPS is used nationwide, so the closer that you get to that timeline and that due date, it tends to run a little bit slower. So please just keep those things in mind, as you continue to work on that. You want to make sure that all the information that is seen here is not conflicting with any other part. So if you're saying that you serve young people, make sure that you indicate that in the subpopulation and those data points requested regarding the different subpopulations. HUD does recommend that you use a general data reference. So instead of saying you're going to serve 10 people in this grant, that you're going to state you'll serve 10 over the term of the grant. So they did indicate that in their guidance. And again, there is a character limit for the narrative, so just make sure that you are mindful of that. We know that it's always a very tricky thing to share the very important things and wonderful work that we do, but HUD wants us to keep it brief sometimes, so it's always a wonderful challenge to have to share those highlights of what we want HUD to know. Also in this section, you're going to indicate a specific population. So we know that a lot of our programs serve, young people, veterans, chronic homelessness. So what is HUD really looking for is if you select a specific population, it indicates that your agency has some special capacity in your facilities. You have some special program design, tools, outreach, or methodologies. So I always like to use the youth reference just because, if you are serving young people, that you have some program designs that really focuses around positive youth development, and you train your employees regarding how to use that in working with young people. So that's an example. It doesn't mean that your project exclusively serves them. It just means that you're uniquely equipped to serve that population. Again, make sure that anything you're checking off here does not conflict with other parts. We have seen in previous competitions that people like to check everything off because they may have one veteran, one chronic, and 1 young person. Please don't do that. Please remember, if you answer yes to any of those questions seen, you should be indicating that, but we haven't seen any agency that has very unique equipped to serve all of the different subpopulations. In the project application, we still see language regarding housing first and whether we are quick to move participants into permanent housing. In the event that for B and C on your screen, if you fail to select the first 4 or 5 boxes, D will automatically pre-populate. So you won't be able to change D to a yes or a no. It all depends on your responses to questions B and C. We have also seen that for our PSH programs in this NOFA, there's still a lot of language regarding Dedicated Plus. Because of our local priorities here in Chicago and our commitment to end chronic homelessness, all Chicago PSH renewal projects have to indicate Dedicated Plus options. This is for those who have not been previously funded for 100% chronic homeless. I'll get to them in a little bit. For everyone else, you should be selecting Dedicated Plus. For those renewal PSH projects where you have been previously awarded under the competitions that all your beds are funded and dedicated to chronic homeless, you have the opportunity to select either 100% dedicated or the Dedicated Plus. No projects that was originally awarded to be 100% dedicated to chronic homelessness have the ability to select NA. If you have any questions about whether your project was funded in the original, when they started, whether it's solely for chronic homelessness, you can always feel free to reach out to us at All Chicago. We do keep a record as to when projects were awarded and under which competition, so we're able to see if that was a stipulation in your contract. So there's a question, just to be clear, all chronic homeless projects now must be dedicated to Dedicated Plus. So not just all CH projects, but all PSH projects have to be Dedicated Plus. If you are a chronic homeless project that was 100% dedicated, you have the ability to select 100% dedicated or Dedicated Plus. So for those 100 dedicated, that just means that you're going to serve only those individuals that meet the criteria of the chronic homelessness definition. And the Dedicated Plus allows for a little bit more flexibility for individuals, and the chronic homeless definition. If you operate a SSO component, so some of those questions may not appear for you, but you'll be asked some different questions. If you're an SSO project, you're going to be selecting whether you're a street outreach, a housing project, or housing structure specific, a coordinated entry SSO, or a standalone supportive services. And depending on your selection, there may be additional questions that show up, in particular for the coordinated entry SSOs. For part 4 is regarding the housing service and HMIS. So you'll be indicating from the supportive services, you'll see a large list of services that are provided and the frequencies. So you'll indicate, sometimes we know that a lot of you have MOUs and linkage agreements with other organizations. So you can indicate whether it's your agency that applies the service, maybe a subrecipient, a partner, or even a non-partner. If you don't officially have an MOU or a linkage agreement with them, you can also indicate them, and you would just have to indicate the frequency of that service. You must enter at least one type of service, so please don't leave this entire section blank. We do want to see at least one. For section 4B, you're going to be asked the housing type and location. Now, it's really important. Different screens will show up depending on what type of program you are. So, PSH, Rapid Rehousing, TH, Safe Havens, and Joint look very different. So just make sure that you did select the right component, and then the screens will populate for you. There's a questions, do TH answer questions 3B. So 3B would be the project information. Yes, so all TH programs will answer 3B. The Dedicated Plus questions only show up for PSH projects. So if you're not a PSH program, you will not see that at all. All right, if you are a PSH program, you will be indicating the number of units and beds. So you want to make sure that, you know, as you can see on your screen, that's a screenshot. It's going to look completely empty, perhaps. You want to make sure that you click on that add button and add all the units and the bed configurations. So you want to make sure that although it says total dedicated chronic homeless beds on that screenshot, you're indicating all the beds dedicated and prioritized for chronically homeless individuals and families. So just make sure that you are conscious of that and that information matches what you have submitted in the HIC. If for some reason you have noticed that what you reported out in the housing inventory count was incorrect, please let us know. We want to make sure that we are capturing this information accurately for the next housing inventory count that happens in January. Also, just remember that if you indicated that you would be prioritizing or dedicating beds, you cannot decrease that number that you indicated in FY 2018. So that will be one of the parts from All Chicago's end, that if we do see a decrease in the number of beds there, we will flag that and let you know if it's a decrease from last year. Because a lot of our PSH projects are scattered site housing, you want to make sure that you're entering the address as to where the majority of beds and units are located at. We know that that sometimes can be tricky just because you may work with 10 different landlords and you have 10 different units scattered across the city of Chicago. If that's the case, you know, and you don't have just one location that has the majority of beds, you can also enter the admin address. I do know some agencies like to just list all their different landlords and units. You are also welcome to do that, you know, and just make sure that you are selecting the correct geocode. So the geocode for Chicago is 171296. So again, that's 171296, and it'll say Chicago. Please do not select the Chicago suburban area because we'll flag that for you to review. All right, part 5 is regarding the participants' information. So this is composed of 2 different parts. One part is for households and the other is for the subpopulation. So you want to make sure that as you're completing this section, you're looking at your project as if it was at full capacity. So not over capacity, not under, and not like the total sum of everyone you've served over the course of the term grant. So you just want to make sure that you're picking one point in time. So if you know for a fact on February 10th you were at full capacity, you would select and complete, you know, and fill out all that information based on that. A chronic substance abuse may be constituted as a disability, so just keep that in mind as you're completing that. It is, you know, it looks kind of like a spreadsheet. Some of the areas are dark gray, so it just may not be applicable to you. And the light gray areas are auto-calculating. So if you're trying to change a light gray area, it's because it's doing an auto sum, and you should be double checking the numbers you submitted in previous boxes. You're always welcome to use HMIS to answer any of these questions. You know, I know your ATA can run reports for you, but if you have some questions as to which report would be the best for you to use, please reach out to the HMIS team at hmis@allchicago.org for any help. On your screen, you'll see what the different screens look like. So you'll see that there's a family of 3, so you have an adult and 2 children. So on the first screen, you'll indicate that you have 1 adult between the ages of 18 and 24 and 2 children. But on the next section, you'll see that you have 1 adult who is a chronically homeless veteran, has substance abuse, chronic substance abuse, and is a victim of domestic violence. And there's 2 chronically homeless children and 2 with a developmentally disability. So just make sure you can see how all those numbers kind of look differently between the 2 screens. There's a question, are we picking our own point in time count for the data? Yes, so whichever date, it could be February 1st, January 31st, but I do want you to focus that you pick a date where you were at full capacity. So please keep that in mind. You're not prompted for any particular date, and so you're more than welcome to pick a date that you know for sure you were at full capacity. Right, on your screen, you may see it kind of small and a little bit blurry, so I apologize for that. I'm trying to stick as much as I can for some visual. So columns 1, 2, 3 are mutually exclusive, so you want to make sure that they don't exceed the total number of persons that you reported in the previous screen. But the rest of the columns 4 through 9 are not mutually exclusive. So you can have someone who has a chronic substance abuse and has HIV and severe mentally ill. So you can indicate a 1, a 1, a 1, right? But you just want to make sure that columns 1, 2, 3 do not exceed that total number of persons. So we're getting almost there. We're in part 6 for the funding request. So we want to make sure that we're not changing any budget line items. The only way that I would say to change any of your budget line items is if your grant, contract, or amendment that has been approved by HUD is different than what was submitted in the GIW. We do know that many of you had some grant execution and some amendments between April to now, so we understand that those things happen. We also encourage you to upload those documents into the attachments because we know sometimes the information doesn't, go back and forth, and maybe there's some concerns between headquarters and your local field office. So you just want to make sure that you're providing that documentation that those amendments have been approved by our local field office because they do rely on the GIW. If you are a project that voluntarily is relocating funding during the local evaluation period, you will be submitting a budget based on that reduced amount. So just make sure that if your total grant is $10,000, but you agreed during the local evaluation that you would be going down to $9,000, please make sure that this budget abides by that. And you would only be able to reduce the amount of those pre-existing budget line items. So if you are a historical shelter plus care project and you have only rental assistance or admin, you only have 2 budget line items to reduce to create that lowered amount. If you wish to pursue a direct rate, you do have to have an approved agreement between the local HUD rep, local HUD office and your agency. You can definitely refer to section VB2H of the NOFA, or you can also contact your local HUD field office to learn more about it and see if you can get an approved agreement by the time of this submission. On your screen, you'll see all the possible component types and their eligible items. So we know sometimes, some of these areas, the budgets just appear for the different component types. So if you selected SSO and you only see lease structured and supportive services budget line items, but you know that you are a safe haven, so you have some leased units, or maybe a rapid rehousing would be a better example. So you're a rapid rehousing project and you need that rental assistance budget line item. It's probably because you selected the incorrect component type, so you want to make sure you go back to the first couple of sections of the project application and select the appropriate category. All right, so you want, as mentioned, you want to make sure that you're selecting the cost. So you'll see what checkboxes you need to select in order to show those screens. For operating budget line items, you do have the opportunity to submit replacement reserves. You will have to submit the documentation. It is an eligible cost, and it's the first time that HUD has indicated that they would like to see the documentation regarding replacement reserve. If you have any leased units in your budget, you want to make sure that you are adding those and accounting for them appropriately. So you're going to select the add button, which is a paper icon with a plus sign, and just make sure that you add that. And the amounts will pre-populate, so just make sure that that amount is accurate. You will be selecting that the area, the metropolitan area, is Illinois, Chicago, Joliet, Naperville as our fair market rent. You want to make sure that the configuration matches the GIW, unless you're doing a reduction. So if you're doing a voluntary reallocation, you want to make sure that you're also addressing that. And also on the GIW, it appears as actual rent. So some of you receive it as FMR, as fair market rate, and others as actual rent. And you'll see in eSnaps, it's often referred to as paid rent. Paid rent just means that it means the same thing as an actual rent. Can you change leasing to rental assistance at this time? No, you cannot. And what would be acceptable documentation for the replacement reserve line items? So there's specific documentation we'll reference as to like what does that mean. So in the NOFA, so we encourage you to review that. Also in the other regulations, it does give clear guidance as to what some of those replacement reserves would be for. So we encourage you to review that as well. We also have a question, can we add units as long as we are not adding any funds to the budget? For instance, we paid for 2 more units using the same amount of funding. So you can. I would say that if you are planning to do this and you are adding the additional 2 units, your new contracts moving forward will keep you at that unit number. So if for some reason, maybe today at this point in time, even though you are funded for 10, but you are operating at 12 because you've been able to negotiate a lower rent with some of your landlords, HUD will continue to keep you at that 12. So if you feel that that is a unit number that you can continue to uphold at the current funding, you can do so. Can we request a revision from rental assistance to leasing? You can, but not at this point in time. So unless you have done this through your local HUD rep and have it approved, you would be able to submit that. But if you are requesting some revisions to that and changing, to request money movement from rental assistance to leasing, especially if you don't have any leasing money currently available, you're not able to do so through the NOFA, but I would encourage you, once the NOFA is done, to start talking with your local HUD rep about making that change. All right, so Max was able to bring up about the replacement reserve. So you just want to make sure that the total amount to be placed in the reserve over the grant, you're able to specify that in your agreement, and that your systems to be replaced and useful life or lives of the system and repayment schedule and scheduled payment amount are shown in that documentation. So if you want to read a little bit more, that is on page 28 of the renewal project detailed instructions. There's also some additional information into the NOFA, but I think as far as documentation, you want to make sure that you're hitting those 3 bullets for that documentation piece. Okay. For the next section, we want to make sure that we are doing match. So again, because HUD doesn't want to see projections, they want to see current commitments. So you just want to make sure that you're indicating what type and the value of that is. Program income may be counted as match. So you want to make sure that you're indicating that as well. If you do indicate that you're counting program income as match, you will get some additional questions that show up. The summary budget, so you'll see all the information will pre-populate based on the previous screens except for admin. So you want to keep your admin amount the same as the GIW. and that's going to auto-calculate to your total assistance. Hopefully your total assistance does not exceed what is on the GIW. If it does, that will flag it for some renewal. So section 7A, attachments. So you want to make sure that if you're a subrecipient, you're including the nonprofit documentation. So you want to include that proof of nonprofit status, any approved indirect cost rates, any approved amendments or grant executions if they show that kind of to balance what we're seeing in the GIW. In-kind, so if you're indicating in-kind as a source of match, you have to upload the MOU between the recipient and the subrecipient of that service. So just one thing to keep in mind for the match section. If you're using operating funds for the replacement reserve, make sure that you're also uploading that documentation. And then in this section, you'll see that you have to select some I certify statements, so just make sure that you are selecting them. For those that are doing a voluntary reallocation during the local evaluation, this is a screen where you'll see the number 1, you must indicate yes. This just flags it so that HUD is able to see in eSNAPs which projects are reducing their grant. So this is the screen that we were referencing when you're importing data. You will navigate to the submission without changes. You see question number 2, that once you select and make changes and have selected those boxes, you won't be able to make those changes. So please just make sure that you are selecting the appropriate boxes because I would hate for someone to restart their application. So I have a question on whether a business associate agreement can be used for an MOU. If you do have an MOU signed in place, you would be able to upload that. So just making sure that you have the MOU in place. Finally, for this section, if you do make any changes, you do have to provide a very quick, brief summary of what those changes are. Usually what we see that HUD likes to see is just you made some changes to the entire part 3, or maybe 6A and so forth. So it doesn't have to give like a very detailed description as to what those are. You can use bullet points as appropriate. All right. So the submission summary. So a couple of helpful things. You'll see on the submission summary any section that you have to complete. Anything with an X to the left-hand side means that you have to go review it back. If you kind of hover over these hyperlinks and click on it, it'll take you directly to that section of the project application, so you don't have to go screen by screen. Also, toward the bottom, you'll see some notes as to what exactly it is that you need to input on that section. So you kind of have some guidance as to what eSNAPs is flagging. All right, so what are the steps to submitting to Chicago? And I know we have 5 more minutes. So, you'll be submitting your project applications in, not in eSNAPs, but through Survey Gizmo. So you're going to submit a PDF. So once you get to that submission summary page that we were just on, there is the opportunity to export. So you'll be able to export the project application, and then you can go to Survey Gizmo and upload it into there. If you are pursuing a consolidation, you must submit the individual renewal project applications along with the consolidated application, so we're able to give it a review. Please do not submit an eSNAPs before, so hopefully I don't see any on August 5th in there, but you do have to submit them to Survey Gizmo. So there's a screenshot of what that export button looks like, so just make sure that you do utilize this for the first round. On your screen, you see the hyperlink to the Survey Gizmo. Again, it'll become available tomorrow morning, so just make sure that you do save this. We'll be also sending this out through an email communication. We will be asking you about the agency contact information and how many project applications you're renewing. So just make sure that as many as you indicate in that section is just going to create the same pages so you can upload your submissions. Please include any consolidation or expansion applications. We just want to make sure that we're viewing all of those and giving you your feedback in an appropriate manner. I will say about the contact information, anyone who is listed on the contact information will be the recipients of our feedback survey. So if for some reason you list your ED and your ED is out on vacation, and you're wondering where your feedback is, it's probably hanging out in your ED's inbox. So just make sure that if you are the person that is responsible for the project application and will be doing any of those edits, that your email address is listed on there. Some additional things, so we'll be asking about the project name and grant number and uploading that project application. We'll be asking you if you know who your local HUD rep is, and also any grant amendments or agreements from FY 2018. Any additional consolidation application information, so we just want to know what those grant numbers are, which one will be the one that you believe will be the main one that will take on the grant number and be the surviving one, so to speak. And also for our new projects that perhaps have not gone through a grant execution with our local HUD rep, please let us know when you anticipate that start date will be. If for some reason some of you have not had a grant execution with our local HUD rep, we also want to know about that. Just because if it gets to December, you don't have one yet, it will deem you ineligible for the upcoming funding sources. So we want to make sure if there's any advocacy that you need for us to help with our local HUD field office, that we are there to support you so that you can receive those funding.
We also asked for HMS IDs for projects.
Yes. So we'll also be asking for HMIS ID numbers. As you know, we just want to make sure that in all our different processes, like our local evaluation, our HIC process, that we're using the same number. So if you don't know what your HIC number, what your HMIS ID number is, please reach out to us. We'll be more than happy. Reach out to your ATA. Your ATA should know what your HMIS ID number is for these purposes. Please do not guess. I know I've seen in past years people put HMIS ID numbers for another organization. So, please make sure that you know what that number is so we don't confuse you with another agency. So HUD has a lot of different guides on their website, and you kind of have to navigate the system and click here and click there and click everywhere to kind of find the different sources. So here on your screen, you'll see this is a page related to the competition. You can see any published FAQs. We have a couple of FAQs out to HUD just for some clarification and things that we saw in the NOFA. So you may see their responses. You can also ask a question to HUD yourself. So that there's that opportunity as well. And the instructional guides are under the application supporting documents. In the handout section of GoToWebinar, we also have created just a document that states NOFA resource links. So we just made a Word document with all the different links, so that way you're just not clicking through different things and trying to find the appropriate one. All right. Here at All Chicago, we are here to support you. So we'll be posting this webinar, our PowerPoint presentations, the resource links, and any other helpful information onto the COC program competition. So, our highlights documents is also included on there. The GIW is also going to be posted onto this page. So you have the hyperlink available in case you have never visited our website. Again, if you are considering grant consolidation, we do encourage you to come on July 31st from 10 to 11. We're going to be discussing some benefits and possible drawbacks, and also discuss some of those requirements in eSNAPs, and also some ranking considerations because they will be incorporated into the ranking. Transition grants. So after our grant consolidation Q&A, we'll also be discussing transition grants. So what does that opportunity look like? What are some benefits? What are some drawbacks of applying for that? And that's going to happen right after the grant consolidation. We will be talking a little bit about what that local COC consent means and any of the requirements in eSNAPs. Now, I know there's always a question like, when do you call HUD? When do you call All Chicago? A couple of helpful hints. So because All Chicago does not oversee eSNAPs, we would not be able to help you with any technical issues, any issues of being locked out of the eSNAPs, if the system's running low, if you don't remember or can't access eSNAPs, or maybe someone at your agency was kind of like the eSNAPs guru and is no longer there and you just have no idea, we would not be able to help you with that. We could direct you, but we'd be directing you to ask a question to their virtual help desk to get you started and working out some of those kinks. When to call us at All Chicago. So if you're having a non-technical issue, so if maybe you have some questions about eSNAPs, some questions you want to talk about your budget, our local funding and ranking policies. If you're having some issues with Survey Gizmo, let us know. Or if you have any questions about the deadlines, you can give us a call, or you can email us at cocprograms@allchicago.org. Because as you can see, Max and I are in here on this webinar, so we're not at our computer. Well, we are at our computer, but not accessing our email address, so to speak. So, there are other team members that are overseeing the COC programs inbox, so they're able to respond with a quick turnaround. So you just want to be mindful of that, to always reach out to them, because like myself, in meetings and so forth, but there will be another team member that will be able to provide a response.
And it also does not guarantee you a faster response if you CC one of us directly, because we will be using COC programs to answer your emails on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, so we'll be providing responses through the COC programs. So we know sometimes people like to email me or CC me and the COC programs. You'll just see a response out of the COC programs. Okay. All right, and there's that email address again. All right, so we had a couple of questions. One thing to note, because everyone had some wonderful questions, so we'll be posting these as well, just kind of like a Q&A, an ongoing document. It's helpful to know, and sometimes if people weren't able to join us on the call, or if we run out of time, because it's 2:33, and I appreciate everyone that's kind of staying on the line. We'll be posting these along with the response, so you're able to kind of check back and see. What if we accidentally submit? That's a great question. Who do we call? You call Elizabeth, or you can call me, Elizabeth. I may not answer, or you can email the COC programs email. That's a great response, because that way whoever is handling the COC programs inbox will be able to go and access eSNAPs and release your application, and just send you an email and say, okay, you can go ahead and edit. So those are some great things to think about. And I'm trying to see. And again, is this recording going to be available? Yes, it is currently being recorded, and will be posted to our website. So if you were only able to join us for a short period of time, you can always feel free to listen to the webinar, pass it on to a colleague, and so forth. All right, and there's a question about MOUs. Do they have to cover the grant period? You would have to upload the current MOU. So I know sometimes MOUs, they get signed on a year by year. So it's a little bit difficult if you're reaching out to that entity and they won't sign one because you have one in place. You could just upload that current one, because the MOU would relate to the in-kind, and in-kind would fall under the match, and match is based on current commitments, not on projections. All right. Well, thank you everyone for all those questions. And if I wasn't able to get to your questions, we'll still, like I said, create a document with all these Q&As and responses. So just be on the lookout. I do apologize. Everyone was submitting wonderful questions. So I appreciate that, because I feel like I'm being heard. So thank you everyone for your time. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. But remember that the next deadline that we have is August 5th by noon. I will emphasize that we do have a noon deadline, so please make sure that you submit that PDF to Survey Gizmo, so that way we can work and review all these project applications and provide your feedback by August 14th. All right. Thank you, everyone, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And I look forward to seeing many of you next week, either at the Q&A or at the HUD COC quarterly meeting.